I know the world of hot tub chemicals can be confusing, and there's a lot of different choices that you can make for what you put in your hot tub's water, and they all have their pros and cons. I use bromine for my sanitizer, as you know if you've seen any of my other videos. But today in this video, we're going to be looking at the differences between bromine granules and bromine tablets to help you decide which one of those is best for your needs. Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from Hot Tub Owner HQ, and I'm glad you're here with me. So first, let's talk about why you might want to use bromine instead of chlorine. I don't use chlorine in my hot tub, and I never have. Chlorine breaks down faster in both sunlight and hot water. Now, while I've got my hot tub covered, obviously, most of the time the water is hot. So that causes the chlorine to go away faster, which means you have to add it more frequently. And while chlorine is cheaper than bromine, having to add it twice as often kind of negates that benefit. But also, bromine has less of an odor than chlorine. So if you react strongly to that kind of chlorine smell that you get with public swimming pools, you're probably going to like bromine better. The other plus of bromine that you don't get with chlorine is that if your pH levels get a little too high, bromine is still an effective sanitizer and chlorine is not. And bromine reactivates when you add your shock, and you should be shocking your hot tub about once a week. Chlorine does not do that. And especially if you've got an indoor hot tub or maybe a hot tub on a screened-in back porch, the off-gassing that comes from chlorine can get a little overwhelming, and you won't have that with bromine. Now let's talk about switching from chlorine to bromine sanitizer, because it's not as simple as just 1 week switching chemicals. You see, bromine and chlorine sanitizers don't mix. And in fact, mixing them can produce a dangerous combination. Now, it is okay to use bromine sanitizer and chlorine shock because that's formulated differently. But if you decide to switch from chlorine to bromine sanitizer, the ideal scenario is to actually wait until you drain your hot tub. And you should be draining your hot tub about once every 3 months or so. But if you don't want to do that, let's say you just changed your water recently and you don't want to wait that long because you've heard bromine is better. In that case, what I would do is not add any sanitizer or shock for at least a week. And while you're doing that, you probably don't want to soak just to be safe. Then dip a test strip in the water and verify that there is absolutely no trace of chlorine in there. Then you're safe to switch. But because your water has gone a long period of time with no sanitizer or shock in there, before you just jump right in and before you toss in a floater with bromine tablets, go ahead and shock that hot tub. And if you're using chlorine shock, make sure you do another test with your test strip before you get in to make sure that the chlorine levels aren't too high. If you're using non-chlorine shock, and in this specific instance, I would actually recommend using a chlorine shock, but if you are using non-chlorine shock, you don't typically have to wait at all to soak after you've added it. Now, let's talk about bromine tablets and what the pros are of using those. The best part about that, and this is actually what I do, you can see my floater back there, and it's full of bromine tablets that I just added 2 days ago. The plus of that is I can put 3 or 4 tablets in there, and it will dissolve slowly over the course of a week, and then it's done. I don't ever think about it again until the same time the next week. So that set it and forget it is incredibly convenient, especially if you struggle to remember when to balance your hot tub. And tablets, because they're in that floater, are actually more stable than adding granular sanitizer, even bromine, which of course is hardier than chlorine. And typically you'll find that bromine tablets in a floater are more cost effective than adding bromine granules. Now let's talk about the cons of using bromine tablets in a floater. The most obvious one is that it takes a while for that bromine to dissipate into your water. So if it's been a little while since you've added sanitizer, or you sometimes forget, which means that your hot tub goes a period of time without appropriate levels of sanitizer, that bromine takes a while to get into your water. The water has to seep into the floater, and there are some fins that you can adjust on the side of the floater that allow more or less water into that, but it has to get in there and interact with the tablets, and then the tablets slowly dissolve. That's the international symbol for tablets slowly dissolving. It has to slowly dissolve into the water, and that takes time. If your sanitizer levels are 0 and you put tablets in a floater and then you put that floater in your hot tub, it's going to be at least 2 days before your hot tub has appropriate levels of sanitation. So if you're the kind of person that doesn't always remember to balance your hot tub chemicals, tablets in a floater are not necessarily going to be the best way to go. You also can't precisely measure how much bromine is going into your water. Yes, you can adjust how many tablets you put in there, and you can adjust the fins on the side of the floater, but that's still kind of guesswork. One thing that I do, of course, is that I put maybe 3 tablets in there, and then the next week when I go to add more, I look to see if there's anything left. If there's none left, and I dip a test strip in, and there's no trace of it in the water, I know that 3 is not enough. And so I might increase it to 4 or maybe even 5. And then the inverse is also true. If you go to open the floater a week later and there's still 3 tablets in there and you dip a test strip in and the levels are way too high, you know you don't need to add as many as you did the prior week. Also, the floater can get stuck in places. The intake valve where the filters are right there sucks water in through the system right there. So it's not uncommon when the filtration system is going for the floater to kind of be stuck against that vent. Also, if you're in there soaking and you don't take the floater out, which is sometimes what I do, and you turn the jets on, it's just kind of bobbing around, bumping into you, which can get annoying. Now let's talk about bromine granules and what the pros are of using bromine granules. Obviously, it dissolves instantly. So if your levels are 0, because it's been a little while since the last time you remembered to add sanitizer to your hot tub, you can add some granules instantly, and within, I would say 15 or 20 minutes, your levels are going to be just fine. It also allows you to give exact dosages. You can measure in a measuring cup if you want to, although I typically usually eyeball chemicals. It also works really well if you've done a water change and you want to instantly start off the new water with the appropriate levels of sanitation. And now let's talk about the cons of using bromine granules. Well, the first one is that you have to test your water with a test strip more often, and you may find that you have to add bromine granules 2 or maybe even 3 times a week. Now, that is going to be less frequent than if you're using chlorine sanitizer, but it's still not as convenient as putting tablets in a floater 1 time a week. It's also easy to over-sanitize your hot tub if you're not careful and you accidentally pour too much in there. Because unlike tablets, let's say you're pouring tablets into your floater and you accidentally put too many in there, you can pull one back out again. You can't do that with granules. Or sometimes I've even accidentally added my bromine tablets into the water. I miss the floater altogether and they fall in there. I can just reach in and grab those. Now, if you are handling bromine tablets, you do want to make sure and wash your hands when you're done handling it though. These are strong chemicals. Typically, bromine granules are going to be more expensive than tablets as well. And if you don't store your bromine granules in a cool, dry place, they can clump up. Moisture can cause it to kind of get stuck together, and then it can be hard to measure out appropriate dosages. Now, of course, with tablets, you also don't want that to get wet or overly humid either, but they're less prone to clumping together than granules are. Now, as I mentioned, I do use bromine tablets in a floater, and I've done that for a long time. I didn't always do that. I've experimented with different things, and I like to experiment with different things and then make videos about it so I can share what I'm finding with you guys. But I do currently use bromine tablets in a floater. You can see my floater right back there. I typically put 3 to 4 tablets in once per week. And then, as I mentioned before, if I open it up the following week and there's nothing left and there's no levels present on a test strip, I'll add 1 more than what I did the previous week. And I do have both kinds of shock. I have chlorine-based shock and non-chlorine shock. Typically, I use non-chlorine shock most of the time because it has less of that chlorine smell. But I save the chlorine shock in case I've had extra heavy usage. Maybe a bunch of people have been in here and that's out of the ordinary for me, and I want to really make sure I shock it the next day. In that case, I'm going to use chlorine-based shock. And it's okay to go back and forth between the 2 different kinds of shock, no matter what kind of sanitizer you use. And it's also okay if you have bromine tablets as well as granules, and you typically do tablets in a floater like that, but you have some granules on hand for when you do a water change, or if you've maybe forgotten to fill the floater and you want to get the levels back up quickly. It's okay to do that. I know the world of hot tub chemicals can be confusing, so I do have a free cheat sheet if you want a simple guide that you can print out and just tape up somewhere on a corkboard or something to let you know exactly what you need to do and when you need to do them. And you can get that cheat sheet with the link down in the description or on this card right up here. But no matter which way you go, no matter what kind of sanitizer you use, always measure your water a minimum of 1 time a week. Get that alkalinity right first, then do pH, then check sanitizer levels and adjust as needed. Turn the jets on unless your pH is already too high and your alkalinity is not, because pH will go up with the jets on. But typically I recommend having the jets on and the cover off right after you've added chemicals. That way you're not splashing those chemicals up onto the underside of your cover, which can shorten the lifespan. Add shock about once a week, rinse off your filters in the kitchen sink about every 3 weeks, and do a deep chemical soak of your filters about every 3 months or so. If you're not sure how to do that, check out this video of mine right up here. But if you do those things, your hot tub is going to be good to go anytime you are ready to soak.